Welcome, everyone. I can see a few more people are coming in, but we'll get started. It's really good to see you all. I'm delighted to welcome you to the launch of our latest publication, Storytelling from the Frontlines. My name's Tracy Martin, and I'm the director of the Quaker Council of European Affairs. So I'll just run through what we're going to do, what's going to happen today. We're going to start with a poem from Meta Sarmiento. Then we'll hear from Saskia Bassa, who put the publication together, and from Edwick Madzimura from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, who's in Zimbabwe, and Deborah Burton from Tipping Points North South, before we move on to questions. And we hope to have about 15 minutes for questions at the end. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably. We tell stories in many ways, and spoken poetry is an important medium for sharing stories. So Meta Sarmiento is an independent rapper, an award-winning Guam-born Filipino poet, now based in Aurora in Colorado, and his work explores the themes of cultural and political identity, climate change, masculinity, and love. And we're really delighted that he's agreed to share this poem with us to get us into the storytelling mood.
Hello, everyone. Half a day. My name is Meta Sarmiento, and I am so thankful that y'all gave me this invitation, but I am sorry that I couldn't be there either in person or even in the same time, just because our time zones are different. I apologize for that, but I am thankful for the invitation regardless. So, hypermilitarization is something I had to grow up with. I was born and raised in the island of Guam. My parents immigrated from the Philippines, so it's kind of been all around me. The climate crisis in the Pacific, you're really on the front lines, seeing it all happen in real time. And that's something I experienced growing up as well. And there are clear links between environmental degradation, global warming, climate crisis, climate change, all of these things with the hyper-militarization of different regions around the world. What I've come to learn is that when you start talking about the carbon footprint, you know, the US military in particular has an extremely huge carbon footprint. And so a lot of my work, in addition to many other things, focuses on giving voice to these kinds of stories and issues. And so today I chose to present a poem called After North Korea's Threats. For those of you unfamiliar, there's North Korea and South Korea. And because Guam is relatively close to North Korea, we've received a lot of threats because we are occupied by the US military. Guam has often become a target for North Korea's threats when political tensions rise in the region. And so I chose this poem today because I think it highlights the emotional aspects of what it means to be in a hyper-militarized region. And hopefully it opens the gateway for y'all to have meaningful discussions and really get ready to challenge ideas in relation to the hypermilitarization of different regions in connection to the climate crisis and other very real emotional repercussions. So I hope you all enjoy this poem, and I hope to build with y'all soon in the future. Thank y'all so much for giving me this chance to present this poem. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Guam.
Guam who?
Guam. You know, the pawn on a chessboard made of missiles. That one headline you read about a while back. That island where my family still lives. Reporters ask how I feel about North Korea's threat. I say, I'm glad the world is watching. But why now? Why not the threats that came when I was a child? When we practiced hiding under desks like a fire drill could prep us for an exploding sun?
We've been in crosshairs since missionaries aimed Jesus at our beach. We've been targets that breathe, families not asking for war but dig a foxhole in the garden anyway. Reporters ask what to do if the conflict escalates. I say, I'll tell mom and pa to leave. Take the photographs, take the love letters, take anything that proves you are not invisible. This country forgot we existed till national security gave us a face. If the bombs fall and they ask where we come from, point to the crater on the map. Say, if war is hell, then we're from purgatory, always in the middle of men playing God, of countries blasting the heaven from our holy ocean. Mom, Pa, you don't deserve to take bullets for these tyrants. Take only what you can carry. Leave enough room for starting again. Hold each other's hands till you're both somewhere safe, even if it's not near me. Reporters ask how political status defines my life as an American. I say, most Americans are surprised to know that I'm a US citizen. They freak out that I can even speak English. They forget how an ocean of islands drowns for a president it can't vote for. How do I believe I'm a son of this flag when it treats me like a bastard, claims me only when convenient, stands at the ready for war, but absent in peaceful talks of sovereignty? Reporters ask how I explain where I come from. I say, the dog thinks it's free outside of the cage, forgets it has a master when the leash is long enough. I'm from the litter left in the jungle. I learned camouflage is pledging allegiance. And ain't that what this country wants? Stay loyal like man's best friend. Tolerate my bark, put me down if I find a voice. Don't want me to bite like a bullet. You ever seen a saltwater wolf? How survival demands a new species. How nuclear radiation gives birth to dark magic. It's rare to meet Americans born where their ancestors died. Those who didn't commit the massacre still benefit from our blood. Those who didn't drop the bombs stay warm from our burning anyway. Those of us who carry the ghost know how heavy forgiveness can be. I say I come from all of that. Good luck quoting such complexities. But in the event you want to talk again, the next time my home is put on a hit list, I'll be right where you found me, howling like a battle cry, with the moon between my teeth.
I want to thank Meta for that really stirring start, and I hope you can see just from that how powerful stories can be. Meta's the author of the poetry book Tie Your Shoes, Kid, and you will see that we put some links in the chat to his work. Now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Saskia Bassa, who's the project manager for QCEA, and she'll tell you a little bit more about the intention behind the publication and share some short excerpts from some of the stories that we've included.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you all speakers and audience for being here today to welcome this report. You can now read the full publication on our website and the link can be found in the chat. I'll tell you a little bit about how this project started. It started over a year ago in an effort to address and fill in a gap we had identified in conversations around climate justice. Generally, communities most affected by the climate crisis and environmental issues often live in places affected by militarism. Yet these two tend to be treated as distinct and separate policy areas. Through the eyes of storytellers and their daily experiences, the connections between the two become evident. This invites us to take an intersectional approach that recognizes how one impacts the other in complex ways. This connection is twofold or has two dimensions. First, militarism has environmental and climate consequences which have a direct impact on the capacity of communities to enjoy a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Secondly, militarism can pose an obstacle to community action for the environment, which they depend on to survive and thrive, and to achieving greater sustainability at a global level. In the face of these challenges, however, communities do not sit idle and employ incredible creativity and resourcefulness to find solutions that enable them to meet their basic needs and nurture connections with the natural world. This publication is an attempt to amplify the voices and stories of these communities. You may be asking yourself at this point, why storytelling? Why are stories important? Storytelling has throughout history and continues to be an important vehicle to bring lived experience to the center, especially in communities that relied on oral communication as a central transmission of social meaning. Storytelling has been the conduit of social cohesion, promoting a dialogue on interpretations and solidifying meaning at the community level. Sometimes storytelling has brought about wider change in what is inherently a bottom-up process. Indeed, storytelling can also be an important peace-building tool, a practice that was highlighted in one of our landmark reports, Building Peace Together. You can find the link in the chat in case you'd like to revisit this publication. Concretely, what will you find in the publication once you have it in your hands, or in this case, virtually through the link in the chat? Storytelling in the Frontlines, from the Frontlines, is a compilation of testimonies that illustrate how militarism and climate are connected in ways that are not often captured by current policy frameworks. You will find stories from the Mariana Islands, from Palestine, from France, Western Sahara, Vietnam, and Guatemala. They cover a wide range of interconnected issues, such as the criminalization of environmental defenders, the emergence of social movements that resist ecosystem destruction, or local efforts to contribute to food sovereignty in highly militarized areas. The selection of storytellers is not exhaustive, but provides a global overview of the issues, revealing something unique about how the interplay of climate and militarism manifests in particular contexts. In choosing these case studies, we were mindful of keeping a reasonable thematic, geographical, age, and gender balance, and generally relied on informal connections, at times snowball sampling, to connect with storytellers from different locations. To give you a taste of what you will be able to find in the publication and the range of themes that are covered, we thought it would be best if you hear from storytellers themselves. First, we will hear a short piece of the testimony of Vietnam Dioxine, which is a collective based in France trying to bring justice and reparation to victims of Agent Orange. These victims continue to suffer years after the Vietnam War was considered over. And really, this story illustrates how militarization can have environmental and human consequences that last generations, as dioxin, which is the main defoliant component of Agent Orange, remains actively harmful to human health and the environment for many, many years.
On voit que les guerres peuvent avoir des conséquences sur l'environnement, donc les bombardements, les mines, les armes chimiques, non seulement sont terribles pour le coût en vie humaine, mais aussi pour l'environnement. Ça entraîne des destructions de forêts, d'espèces animales, de biotopes, de sources d'eau et puis d'écosystèmes en général. Et on voit qu'il y a des problèmes environnementaux qui sont aussi à l'origine de guerres, avec des problèmes, le problème de réchauffement climatique, d'eau, d'appauvrissement des terres, et puis la lutte pour les ressources. C'est des choses qui entraînent aussi des conflits.
So Collective Vietnam Dioxine are currently fundraising for Tan Dong Gas historical trial against 14 agriculture. The link to the fundraiser is available on the chat if you would like to support. And some members of the collective are also among the audience if you would like to ask them any follow-up questions. Next, we will hear from Tate Hlepip, an engineer from Western Sahara that found an innovative way to build shelter for displaced people by using plastic bottles filled with sand to build houses in the desert. His experience illustrates how climate solutions, particularly green, impact on communities that are affected by military occupation and displacement.
الآن في الجزء المحتل من الصحراء الغربية، الجزء المحتل من الصحراء الغربية، المغرب يقوم باستنزاف الكثير من الموارد ويقوم بإنشاء الكثير من المشاريع، الطاقة الخضراء، الطاقة المتجددة، طاقة الرياح، الطاقة الشمسية. هناك استنزاف مقصود. تخيلي بأنه أنا أحيانا أتحدث مع بعض الأصدقاء في الجزء المحتل من الصحة الغربية، يقول لي بأن النظام المغربي لديه عمال يعملون 24 ساعة. هناك فوج يأتي في النهار وفوج يأتي في الليل باستنزاف هذه الموارد. تخيل أنت هذا الاستنزاف، هذا يعطي انطباع بأن هذه الأرض ليست أرضي، لكن إذا سأستغل كل الفرصة من أجل استنزاف الموارد 24 ساعة. يقول هناك فوج في الليل والنهار.
I hope this has been informative and has made you want to read more. To close this presentation, I will just say a word about how you can use these stories. We definitely encourage you to disseminate these stories, and particularly by rekindling the practice of storytelling in your own communities. We really believe that the road to peace can become more visible when we sit in a circle and listen to each other's stories, and particularly when we're willing to be changed by the other. We hope this publication motivated you to spread these stories like seeds so they can grow into something bigger. A specific yearly meeting recorded in 2007, stories can teach gently, but the learning is lasting. The audiograms will also be available on our website for further use, and there's 6 of them, one for each storyteller. We also hope to have a French version ready in April and available on our website. I will now hand back to Tracy. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to the Q&A later on.
Thanks, Saskia. And just to note that I'm not sure some of you missed some little bits of that, but also that there is you can support the fundraiser for Collective Vietnam Dioxin. There's a link in the site. They've got ongoing court cases in France. And I just also like to take the opportunity to say thank you to Saskia, and those lovely illustrations you saw are also Saskia's as well. So she's not just been collecting and listening to the stories, she's been drawing for us as well, which is great. I'd now like to invite Edwig Madzimura from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom based in Zimbabwe to share her thoughts on storytelling on the front lines. She doesn't have a great Edwig doesn't have a great internet connection, so I think she's not going to turn her camera on, but I'd like to invite her to speak.
In my presentation, I'm going to focus on militarism and how it is affecting the African continent, and how as a continent we are treating the issue of militarism. So firstly, you realize that when you talk about militarism in the global south, our communities, they actually just focus on militarism at local level and how it is affecting them, directly. The issue of connecting militarism with climate change is still very far from being, in touch with our grassroots communities. But that's an area in which we are really trying as much as possible to raise awareness so that grassroots communities will actually know how the global North military industries are actually contributing to high carbon gas emissions, which are also contributing to the climate change crisis, to which our grassroots communities are actually aware of because they are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. So you realize that as a result of the climate crisis, there are a lot of conflicts at grassroots level, and these conflicts are not just are very, very violent conflicts, and blood is being shed, on a daily basis. But trying to track back how the global North military industries are contributing, it's really far-fetched. So that's why we are raising awareness, so that even as members of parliament, they actually look into how these industries are contributing, and as a nation, what role are we supposed to be playing to ensure that we ensure that there's a cut on military expenditure, especially at global military expenditure. You realize that a lot of trillions are being channeled into the military industry. Yet we only have 1 billion that was pledged to the climate crisis. instead of the continent being offered, lasting peaceful solutions to the problems that are directly affecting us, especially when it comes to the climate crisis, the money that is available is being used to buy arms, and the resources that are available in our continent are being used to exchange, in exchange for weapons. You look at countries such as DRC, they've got vast mineral resources, but the communities are poor and they're always fighting amongst themselves. And you realize that these terrorist groups, instead of, acquiring resources to further empower their communities, they will be busy acquiring weapons. And then you also look at how indigenous people are being displaced to pave way for foreign investors in the continent. It is very common in most of the countries in the African continent. Focusing on Zimbabwe, we've got cases in point where locals were displaced and promised compensation that never came, to pave way for foreign Chinese investors who were coming into the diamond fields. And this is contributing to environmental degradation. And then the local people are not even benefiting from the resources that are available in their vicinity. In fact, they are suffering with the resources that are in their communities, because they are the ones that are contributing to them being displaced from their indigenous homes. In 22 last year, most NGOs in Zimbabwe, they protested over the environmental degradation, the degrading labor practices and human rights violations, including the displacement of hundreds of villagers from chrome fields, diamond fields, and gold claims, to pave way for the Chinese. So as an organization, what are we doing, to ensure that we also fight at grassroots level? So since 2020, we've been running trainings on the use of biogas digesters. Why the use of biogas digesters? Because we realize that the traditional use of firewood is leading to desertification. It's also contributing to conflict among communities and households. Then we have rolled out these trainings to make sure that women they can get empowered through the construction of biogas digester plants. And we've been also lobbying to local councils to provide funds for the biogas digester plants to be constructed by women and young people. And this was a success because in our region, we have one biogas digester plant in which our local council offered the funds, and the biogas digester plant was built by women and young people. And it also attracted donors who are now willing to make sure that 33 more biogas digester plants are going to be built in the district. This is going to be a form of women empowerment. I was talking about the project that we are conducting at community level. So I was discussing about how we have done trainings on biogas digester plants. We are also lobbying for funding to carry out an environmental rehabilitation program, because we've got areas that were affected by artisanal mining activities. And we also have community environmental peace committees that are responsible for ensuring that there is peace. And we reduce the number of conflicts that are happening as a result of resource scarcity. And then at national level, we are also very involved in disarmament advocacy and raising awareness among parliamentarians. So I don't know if I didn't exceed my time, but this was my presentation. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much, and my apologies for my network that has not been very stable. That's one of the problems that we face in the global south.
Thank you, Edwick. Yes, and it's one of the challenges of collecting these stories. So it's a chance for the audience to experience what it was like actually collecting stories, and we know that that's a challenge for many people. So thank you, Edwick. And there's information about your organization in the chat. Next, I'd like to invite Deborah Burton, one of the co-founders of Tipping Points North-South, a cooperative that supports creative projects that advance social justice to global level. Deborah leads on TPNS's advocacy project, Transform Defence for Sustainable Human Safety. And I invite her to speak now and share her thoughts on the publication.
Thank you, Tracy. And Edwick, I'm in solidarity with you because my camera keeps going down. So if I'm pixelating everybody, I'm really sorry. I don't want to turn off the camera, but I apologize for that in advance. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Saskia. Thank you, Edwick. Thank you, Meta. Thank you, everybody, for this, for inviting me to be part of this event. I think it is an important gathering, actually. And I do want to say thank you to Saskia and everyone who involved in this project, because I think you're right. I think we cannot have enough of the stories, these sorts of stories that you brought together. You know, we all owe a debt to every storyteller in the project that has taken the time and committed the resources to sharing their stories and to be talking about. And Edwick is absolutely right. It's really not. It's not out there yet in terms of the wider global south, organizing, campaigning, climate change campaigning. This intersection of militarism, climate change, and human rights is beginning to break out there. So the more we can do to advance this intersection, the better. So thank you very, very much to everybody that's pulled this together. I mean, for me, I'm being asked to sort of respond to the publication and the value of it. The overriding thing I came away with was the sort of David and Goliath nature of the power relationships, you know, and the courage and the determination it takes to resist in whichever way is right for the community, given very different circumstances. And when you consider the resources at the disposal of, and Edwick has also talked about it there, and Mita, the resources at the disposal of the Goliath, let's say, and you compare that to the resources available to David, you know, the communities, it's a huge tribute to all those working successfully to make the change that they want to see in their communities. It's hard. So we're at Tipping Point. We work specifically on military spending and military emissions. So we're former trade, tax, and climate campaigners in the international development sector. And we believe that this whole area of militarism is every bit as implicated in economic and environmental justice as indebtedness, unfair trade, tax evasion. And in making this case, we make a couple of key points. One is very obvious, that military spending, as the poem taught us, reflects geopolitical power, and that high military spending is the enabler of high military emissions in peace and war. I mean, everything we work on is in that framing of peace and war emissions, military emissions. And notably, the G20 accounts for 87% of military spending. And global military spending is currently running just over $2 trillion per annum. And that has increased 20% since 2013. It's gone up by 21% since 2013. So if the world's, just to put all of this in terms of what communities are up against, what climate vulnerable countries are up against, if the world's militaries were a nation, they would be the 4th largest emitter in the world. Militaries plus their supply chain, so that's the defense industries that you know, that they're interlocked, obviously. Combined, so the militaries plus their supply chain combined, they account for approximately 5.5% of global emissions. So that is more than shipping and civilian aviation combined. So for COP last year, we at Tipping Point, we co-published a report with the Transnational Institute, TNI, and Stop Wappendam. It was called Climate Collateral: How Military Spending Accelerates Climate Breakdown. And in it, just a couple of highlights from that report, from the research. The richest countries in the world, so these are categorized as Annex 2 countries in the UN climate talk. So the richest countries are spending 30 times as much on their armed forces as they spend on providing climate finance for the world's most vulnerable countries, something, by the way, they are legally bound to do. Between 2013 and 2021, so in just 7 years, the richest country spent $9.5 trillion on the military, compared with $244 billion on additional climate finance. Between those same years, 2013 and 2021, the richest countries accounted for 64% of the total value of international arms transfers, and they have exported arms to all 40 of the most climate vulnerable countries. So in 2019, we published a report which we call Global Military Spending, Sustainable Human Safety and Value for Money. And by the way, we use the term safety. We don't use security. Security is a complex, complicated term depending on who you are and, and where you are. So we just use the word safety. So in that report, just a handful of examples to give you, and again, it's picking up on what Edwick said, a handful of examples in terms of what's going on in the military and what's not going on everything else. So 1 year's global military spending, it's $2 trillion, just 1 year, would fund any one of the following. I'm going to give you a handful of examples. Climate finance for 20 years, UN disaster risk reduction for 4,000 years, global biodiversity conservation, now that's at $100 billion a year, you'd get that for 20 years. WHO funding, that's just $2 billion per annum. You get 1,000 years of WHO funding for that 1 year's military spending. And UN peacekeeping, which is roughly 15 billion per annum, you'd get 133 years of UN peacekeeping for 1 year's military spending. Just gives you some context. I'll just wrap up. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has absolutely supercharged military spending. And in the face of almost certainly overshooting the 1.5 degrees of global heating in the coming decade, unless a miracle happens, and we can pray for a miracle. And we're possibly touching 3 degrees by the end of the century. It is absolutely beyond comprehension that we are in a new arms race, while people and planet are in this climate emergency, in need of vision and resources to reverse the trend and set a new equitable course, first and foremost, for those climate vulnerable nations in the global south. And to come back to the primary report of the call, which is to foreground the stories told by those on the front line. Behind these big numbers that I've just been talking about are the first-hand testimonies of those people who face the consequences of militarism. People upon whom these crimes, and in fact, we are often talking about crimes, are perpetrated. So I would just say, for me, the marriage of the stories with the big numbers tell the story of militarism in the round. And together they provide powerful campaigning tools with which to challenge rich, powerful countries who underpin this profoundly damaging nexus of militarism and climate change.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Edwick. And there's information about both organisations there. And I just like us to take just a little moment and a few deep breaths, because there's a lot to take in there, I think. And I'm grateful to both of you. And I'm also grateful that it's a reminder, I think, that, although it's David and Goliath, we hope that when we know we're not alone in the work, and there are lots of organizations doing amazing work, and also our responsibility to be in solidarity with the people who are most affected and to share those stories. So that was a really helpful reminder. Thank you. So thank you all. Thank you for your careful listening, because the storytelling is important, but the listening is just as important, if not more so, and for your participation. The link to the publications in the chat. It's licensed under Creative Commons. Do feel free to use and disseminate, and to use in your work, as we'll use in our work of influencing policymakers, making sure voices are heard. And thank you to all of our speakers and to the storytellers. And thanks to Dovile for doing our technicals and also all the layout and design of the publication. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.